If you were to ask me, I would say like 7 or 8 years ago, I would be so much more pessimistic about what we're talking about now. So it took just putting in the effort and trying things, new ways, new strategies, new recruiting ideas for me to understand that it's just the way you do things and the time you put in that makes a difference.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Aleph Ventures TV. Today I am joined once again by the one and only Mark Nelson. Mark, welcome back to Aleph Ventures TV.
Thanks, Hogan. Good to be here once again.
Awesome, man. So Mark serves as the Vice President of Operations for Paris Painting. Mark, why don't you maybe just give a little bit of a profile of Paris Painting for anybody who doesn't know, kind of overview of the company and kind of what your role is in it today.
Yeah, for sure. So Paris Painting is going to be around the more than $10 million in painting revenue, and we do commercial, residential, interior, exterior. We do some carpentry repair, drywall. But our niche is residential. So that's an overview of the company. And I don't know if I can go further into a little bit about the snapshot of the history of Paris Painting, but I started as a painter. So that was about 10, 11 years ago. And now we've grown to the point where we have a lot of painters. So it's been cool. It's a cool journey.
Yeah. Like I said, this is you coming back to the show. We did an episode a few weeks back. Folks can definitely check that out and hear a little bit more about your specific background. But I wanted to have you back on, and I wanted to jam out a bit on the subcontractor model. So I think this is something that I get into conversations with owners quite a bit. There's obviously different practices all across the country when it, as it relates to labor, what type of labor, and kind of the two classic camps of in-house employees, W-2 versus, subcontractor 1099 model. So I think there's all kinds of good things to talk about there. First question I want to jump into is just from a business standpoint, and I think folks who have been doing subcontracting for a long time, this is maybe it's the air they breathe, so they don't really think about it, but maybe folks who have heard about it but never tried it. Like from a business standpoint, why is a subcontractor model appealing as a business owner?
Yeah, I think when we talk about subcontracting, we're really talking to three different audiences. You have the painting business owners that have never tried subcontracting. They have their ideas of what that will mean for them and what that looks like. You have this other group of people that they try subcontracting. They currently subcontract, but there are so many pain points that they're not solving or they don't know how to solve. And then the third audience that we're talking to are those companies that do subcontract and they do it well, or they have a mix of employees and subcontractors. So I think what's appealing about the subcontracting model is the biggest thing is there's a lot less overhead that's needed. So when I say overhead, I mean all of the training, the infrastructure, including the vehicles, equipment, onboarding processes, SOPs, the people, the leadership team, managers, on-site supervisors. There's a lot of overhead that is needed when you have an employee base or a ton of employees. So when you work with subcontractors, they have to provide all of that stuff. They provide their own training, their own tools, their own equipment, and so on and so forth. So if you can imagine in a volatile market or in an economy that you don't know what's going to happen 3 or 4 months from now, using subcontractors is very appealing, or at least using some subcontractors, because you can easily onboard and offboard subcontractors when you have the sales, if you have a boom in sales, or if you have a dry spell in sales. So I think just the overhead in itself is a huge selling point for working with subcontractors. And they're naturally going to be faster. There are a lot of subcontractors that could be slower than your W-2 painters, but often your subcontractors are going to want to get their project done as fast as they can because that's how they make money. So not only are they trying to do a very good job with good quality as a painter or as a group of painters, but they're also wanting to go as fast as they can. And that only benefits you as the contractor, giving the subcontractor the projects, because now you can do more projects in a smaller amount of time. So I think those are the two big things that stand out to me. Now, I've been doing this for a little over 10 years and working with subcontractors for 7 or 8 years. And there's a lot of different little benefits. And obviously there are some downfalls or like setbacks or maybe some cons to working with subcontractors when you compare working with W-2s. But I think there are a lot of benefits. And I think as a business owner, it's the fastest way to scale your company in a healthy way.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree with that. It's October 1st as we're recording this. And for a lot of business owners that are in seasonal climates where they have an exterior season and an interior season, I talk to guys who have employee labor base, and they'll say things to me like, oh, we're already 75% sold, or we're already 90% sold of our capacity for the winter. And that is telling me, like, obviously they're employees because they have a fixed capacity, right? So that flexibility of being able to scale up or down depending on demand, you can sell to it. That's something that's great for sure.
Yeah, and when you say that, I mean, you could always go out and hire employees within the span of like 1 to 3 weeks, right? So the capacity could always be there, but reality is you can't get good people, train them to work in your systems, and then take advantage of your sales that you need to take advantage of in the moment. Whereas subcontractors, it's a phone call and some vetting and a vetting process, and then you could probably get a new subcontractor to work for you within the span of 1 week. And so it's that speed to scale and the speed to match what your sales team is doing, which is appealing. No,
that's great. Let's give the other side of maybe the argument, if there is one, and we know that there is an argument oftentimes around which is a better model or whatnot. But if we were to try to, like, what are the honest pitfalls, cautions, downsides to having a largely predominant subcontractor labor base?
That is a very good question and discussion, because that is something that will keep painting companies from using subcontractors, or they will try to work with subcontractors, and then there are these obstacles, let's call them, that it makes it harder to effectively and in a healthy way work with subcontractors, make that successful. So I would say those pitfalls or those common issues are quality is a big thing. Because they're subcontractors and not employees, you cannot by law train them how to paint, and you can't train them how to do things like that. You can set forth expectations and expect them to hit those expectations, but you're always going to deal with quality issues. And I would say even with employees, you're going to be dealing with quality issues. It's just with employees, you can get your hands on. You can come to the site and get your hands on and train them in the moment, right? So I think with subcontractors, you need to know what their quality level is like, and you're not going to know that without testing them out. So if I bring a subcontractor in for the first time, I do not know anything about them. They can show me pictures of the work they do, but that tells me nothing, right? They could have pulled those pictures off of Google or ChatGPT and showed me that work, and I cannot take that as truth. I need to set up a test project, we like to call it, and just to make sure we can verify what they're saying when we first meet them and their quality and so on and so forth. So quality is a pitfall or an issue. Also, I'm pretty sure a lot of people who work with subcontractors, there's always a labor negotiation. And I've heard from so many different painting companies that, for example, they'll tell me, Mark, my subcontractors always want more money, to the point where they're threatening to walk off the site. And that's a real thing. That's real. Subcontractors, some know their worth, some don't know their worth, and sometimes the job isn't a right fit. with subcontractors, and it's just not worth it to move forward with them. So that brings about a lot of different scheduling and logistic issues that if you're not prepared for, it's going to be a lot of pain and a lot of, one step forward, two steps back. So the labor price negotiation part of it, that's another issue. Let's see what else. I think you're always going to have in our market in the Twin Cities. I would assume that in most other markets in the country, you're going to have people who don't speak your language that are in the trades or in the workforce. So to be able to communicate effectively and transparently with your subcontractors, a lot of people can't do that effectively. They're afraid to do that, or they just refuse to do that. And that is one thing that some people will just say, you know what, that seems like a lot of work and I'll pass. I can hire people that are maybe more aligned with my communication styles. That will be less work or less effort to communicate with. So I think those are some of the bigger ones that I hear and we've experienced at Paris Painting as well. And I think the last one is if you grow to scale, or if you grow quickly, I've had people tell me that, I can't find good subcontractors, and good can mean a lot of different things, but I just don't know where they are. I don't know how to find them, recruit them, and that's an issue as well. Which I would say that's more of an effort and strategy issue than an actual labor shortage, because at this point I don't believe there's a labor shortage in most places in this country. So those are some of the downfalls. If you want me to go deeper into those, I can. But
well, we will, and maybe too. I should have had you do this at the start, because as you're talking about the hurdles, I'm noticing you're kind of talking of how you address them or how you overcome them. Just to put our cards on the table, we at Aleph, certainly Paris Painting, were a subcontractor model. So maybe too, just as far as the profile, like how many projects will Paris Painting roughly? How many projects will Paris Painting complete this year? Would you say?
It's over 2,000 residential projects. So
yep.
Average job size of $6,500.
And so I think this is important too. A lot of business decisions that an owner is going to make are going to come down to, what are you trying to do? What do you want your business to look like? Where do you want to go with it? What do you want to get out of it? And so maybe speak to why is subcontracting a good fit for us, like for Paris Painting?
Mm-hmm. So Paris Painting has a unique story, right? There are not a lot of people in the company do not come from a painting background. So if you can imagine a lot of people outside the industry coming in to try to start and grow and run a painting business, that's kind of where we come from. And so when you think of it that way, we believe totally that if you bring on board good people with good intentions and the level of care that you would want in an employee, a friend, coworker, you name it, you can teach them and train them anything. So I would say what's appealing to us is the ability to scale the company quickly and in a healthy way, but also we feel like we can manage the logistics and the communication and the customer experience so much better at high volume when we have subcontractors that we can work with to do the work. So we have 7-8 project managers that manage the subcontractors. We have a small group of painters, carpenters, and washers that are in-house W-2 employees, and then we have a coordination team that consists of six individuals here in the office, and they're coordinating everything, scheduling everything. So as the infrastructure grows, we expect that the labor is right there, and it will grow as quickly as we can get the sales. So maybe if I can just give this example, our plan for this year was X amount of sales dollars, right? But we found out that earlier on in the year, the people were buying in May and June like we haven't seen before. So we ramped up marketing. We hired on 2 additional salespeople, and we actually oversold what our plan was. So because of that, we hired 1 project manager and another coordinator, and then we had the labor to produce the work because we can recruit subcontractors fairly quickly and onboard them fairly quickly. So I think, again, the ability to scale effectively and quickly is what's very appealing with a subcontractor model.
That's great. So, okay, let's dive into. I just want to unpack and get into the weeds of like how you go about, having a subcontractor labor force. So, let's say, and again, my hope is anybody who is thinking about venturing into using subs would get some benefit here and get some direction from, I think, a company that's best in class on doing it. Maybe one thing I would just add is customer experience is something like that is core. Paris Painting invests a lot of money into roles and infrastructure that monitors and tracks customer experience. So I feel like I can confidently, in a data-driven way, speak to the level of customer experience that Paris Painting delivers with a subcontractor crew, and to do so profitably. Right? I think that those things together is why I would say, best in class. So how you've mentioned a couple of times that you don't believe there's a labor shortage. Finding more subs it feels easy at this point. Let's maybe just go back a little bit. It didn't always, maybe you didn't always have that degree of conviction. So,
Right.
But Paris Painting has grown and grown rapidly. What have you learned as we've tried to grow and tried to go get labor that makes you so confident to say those things today?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if you were to ask me, I would say like 7 or 8 years ago, I would be so much more pessimistic about what we're talking about now. So it took just putting in the effort and trying things, new ways, new strategies, new recruiting ideas, for me to understand that it's just the way you do things and the time you put in that makes a difference. So I would say back in the day, I would be like, you know what, there's no way I can recruit subcontractors, or from what I experienced at the time, subcontractors their quality just wasn't to the point where I felt like it was necessary for our business, and to keep a level of customer experience that was that would be sustainable for our brand, but also at least halfway decent. So I think it took like boots on the ground, recruiting tactics, and testing a lot of the subcontractors out on projects of ours. And it's amazing how many people know how to paint, but if you don't set expectations with them from the beginning, they will cut corners, they will have bad days and not think about the consequences. But if you set expectations really well from the beginning, it's amazing how well they will perform. And that's the piece that I didn't understand until we decided to tighten up our expectations and make them a little bit more clear to the subcontractors from the beginning. And then we realized, the subs that we onboarded 2 years ago, we're having so many more issues with them than the ones we just onboarded a couple weeks ago, because the expectations that we set for both sets of subcontractors was completely different. And it's like, if I were to work with sub A 2 years ago versus now, that same sub would do a lot better if those expectations were set like they were today versus 2 years ago, where there was not a lot going on at all as far as expectations. So I would say the biggest thing is finding subs, recruiting good subs. And then I think a lot of companies and painting contractors have an issue, or they have obstacles, or there's tension with setting the correct expectations and being very clear. So I think whenever we have a new subcontractor come into our office, we sit them down for an hour-long orientation meeting where we tell them exactly who we are, how we do things, how we pay them, and then what we expect of them, and we're crystal clear of what they should expect of us. And if anything differs than what we say in that initial meeting, they have the freedom, and we encourage them to come to us to say, hey, this isn't what we talked about, because we want to follow through with everything that we say. And being crystal clear, we might not have the best labor prices, we might not have the most oiled system or the most personable system, but they for sure know what they're getting into, and that is very underrated. And I think some subcontractors value that more than the dollar amount.
Okay, I want to unpack those things. You talked about like finding the subs, making sure the ones that you find the good ones, and then getting them through a process to set clear expectations. Let's just take those in turn. And I want to, like, if I am a project manager that just, started with Paris painting, and I'm kind of learning what that looks like. Just very practically, what are the tactics, strategies? You mentioned boots on the ground. Like, what does that tangibly look like to find new subcontractors? How are we doing that today?
Man, I think I have a little one pager that has like 8 to 9 different ways to recruit subcontractors. I think the most effective ways for us have been the amount of time that we spend in person at supplier stores. So your paint stores, your box stores, your hardware stores, hand out your business card, hand out like handmade or not handmade, but manually made flyers that you can hand out, post on some job boards at these stores, talk to your stores to say, hey, if you see anyone looking for work or that maybe look like they're looking for work, hand my card out. So that's a very good option. We also tell our PMs that if you're driving through the cities and you see a vehicle that looks like they might be painters, stop by and give them your card and explain who you are. Give them your card. The more cards you hand out to subcontractors or painters or whatever the trade is, the more likely you are to get them to call you back or message you back. So, and I think the quickest way, and this is kind of like a cheat code nowadays, but it is a way where you can get the names and phone numbers of a lot of different subcontractors in your area, is use social media. Facebook has been one of the biggest channels of recruiting subcontractors that we've found. And you go find Facebook groups like, in our case, it's Painters of Minneapolis and St. Paul, or there are a lot of Hispanic groups that are on Facebook that if you just type in those groups, you can search for them. Some of them are closed groups, some of them are open groups, but a little post that takes 30 minutes to craft that says, hey, here's who I am. I work for this company, and we're looking for painting subcontractors to do work with, and we're excited because we have a lot of projects. Direct message me, or even you can put your phone number in when that's risky because you're going to get a lot of texts and calls that you probably don't want to receive. But I think the first time we did that was 4 or 5 years ago, and one message yields probably 30 to 40 people messaging us. That's 30 to 40 subcontractors / phone numbers. I would say half of them are legit. And then you're bringing in probably half of them for an interview or an orientation. And then there you have like 8 to 10 subcontractors right off the bat that you have the choice to test out. And I would say, so that is an underrated method of recruiting that I don't think a lot of people venture into a lot. But I will say that when you can meet someone in person, you can give them a good impression, and it's all about first impressions with a lot of people. If they think you're genuine and you're a decent human being, they're probably going to call you or text you to say, hey, do you have projects for me, or can we meet? So there's nothing like boots on the ground, going to the box stores, going, unmarked vans or trucks and handing out your business cards, but social medias. And I would say Indeed.com, that's a way where I think that's a platform that you're going to find, people looking to be subcontractors or employees. But those are huge for us. As we grew, those are big for us. And now we have a ton of different avenues that we can recruit from.
I think what's important in there is there's not anything, maybe social media is something that, I feel like we've done that pretty well, but nothing in there is like rocket science, right? It's like, get your name out there, shake trees, pop in store, like go to where painters go, Totally. It's a numbers game.
It's completely a numbers game. The more cards you hand out, the more people you talk to, the more people you talk to talk to other people and to be on the lookout. It's just a numbers game, and it's effort.
And I think something I heard, I forget exactly where I heard this, but I think this is especially true for business owners. Something like the quote is, a lot of people give up like 6 hours too early on like a big issue in their business. So they're, and I think this has been true. I've seen this at times whenever we've grown from a sales standpoint over the years in Paris, and then we've needed to put in an effort on recruiting and building up labor capacity, that you might have like a big issue in your business that takes 8 hours to solve. It's not rocket science. It's just, it is going to take the 8 hours. But for a business owner, spending more than an hour or two on any one issue feels like you have so many competing, things. And so maybe you put 2 hours into something and it's not yielding the result right away. And so it's like, this doesn't work. Where it's like, if you would have pressed maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 hours more, like you would have actually gotten to it. And I think when it comes to labor, recruiting labor, that is really what it comes down to. It's not that, I think a lot of people do try these tactics. I think that they try them for an hour or two, and then it doesn't they don't get a good batch right away, and then they conclude this doesn't work. Where it's like, you got to put in enough effort to really get the pool. So I think just hearing from a successful business that's scaled with subs, this is what we've used, so we know it works. It's kind of a matter of time invested.
Yep.
That really matters.
Totally. And I think the honest truth is, when you become when your name gets out there in your market, you will have more and more painters, carpenters, subcontractors coming to your door, which is going to help. So if you think about building your brand, it's a cycle. If you onboard more subcontractors, you can do more work in a fast amount of time. And if you have the infrastructure to manage the customer experience very well, your brand is going to get out there. The name's going to get out there. The referrals are going to get out there. But the referrals are not only in your customer base, but it's also the people who work for you. If they like working for you, if the system is smooth, they get paid on time, and everything is clear, and you're good people, they're going to tell their friends who might have friends that paint, and it's just a ripple effect. So I think it all boils down to, when you grow your company, and the bottom line, you're also going to grow your labor force, you're going to grow your brand presence and your reach, and that reach is more than just your customers. So I think what you said is, like, it is the effort, and if you dig just a couple more feet, you'll hit gold. And people turn away right before you hit the gold chest. So I think that's real, and I think all it takes is a couple subcontractors. When you do those methods, you put in the effort, once you taste that, man, it feels like you can recruit like a professional recruiter. It almost seems like so. But yeah, don't give up. I think there's plenty of labor out there. It's just putting in the work and meeting people.
Okay, so then what is the criteria? Like, what have you learned over the years of, like, red flags, or things that it's like, if I hear this, I know that they're actually probably a good fit? Or like, what have you learned and that you're looking for specifically?
That's a good question. I think at this point, I have a lot of feelings that dictate what I think about subcontractors, just because I've seen and met so many subcontractors. I was a project manager in the field myself for many years. And so I've seen a lot of, people coming to me at first saying, hey, this is what we do, here's some pictures. And then they would be so awful on the job site that I'm like, I just got scammed. And I don't know if they knew they scammed me, but I just got scammed. Yeah. So I think I have a lot of feelings that I have, perceptions. I don't know if you want to say I profile people, but I definitely know the personalities that often don't work out. I think what's a red flag is when people are too prideful of what they can do. And if you ask them, so what things can you do? Can you spray enamel? Can you spray cabinets? Do you do stain and varnishing versus enamel work? Do you do commercials? Are you lift certified? Can you do carpentry? Can you do drywall and texture? If they're like, yeah, we can do everything, you name it, that is red flag number one. Now, there are a lot of people who can do that, but there's a good chance that they can't do it, but they know someone who can. And as much as we love subcontracting, when our subcontractors subcontract, that's when things get messy. It's the degree of separation that becomes more and more. I mean, you dilute that relationship or that communication when the subcontractor subcontracts who might subcontract. So I think that's the first red flag. The second red flag is if they can't really look you in the eyes and they don't have a really firm handshake, I'm not saying that that's a deal breaker, but I think you're going to know who the aggressive and passionate painters are that want to make money, and they know what it takes to make the money, which is train your people to be fast and good. I think they're going to have a different feel to them than I've had people come in here and they're a little bit awkward, socially awkward with me. And I on the flip side of things, I should say that I've had some of those subcontractors come to me acting or appearing that way that actually turn out to be awesome. So I'm not discounting, or I'm not saying that, you know, if they're awkward or can't hold up a conversation, that just don't test them. I think just that's a flag to be wary of, and make sure that you keep an eye on that as your first couple of projects go.
On that point, I'm curious how would you encourage somebody? I guess one, I'll give you some props. You took it upon yourself to learn and become fluent in Spanish to help you in these conversations as well. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, anybody, like, I don't think there's anybody listening to this that if they taught themselves Spanish, that they would regret it. If this is a lot of what they do, but not everybody's going to have that. Do you have any thoughts or tips or encouragements of, like, if there's a language barrier? I think sometimes it can be hard to, like, if there's a language barrier, somebody might, you know, a Spanish speaker might feel timid. Let's say if you're doing somebody who's Hispanic, like, they might feel timid, or they might not present as confident because they don't speak English. And so, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't paint or that they don't have skill. Do you have any thoughts or tips on how to navigate if there's a little bit of a language barrier to still try to get a feel for their skill? Because that's ultimately what you care about. Yeah,
you can. I would say, in my experience, I've talked to people who can't speak English and people that can only speak English. And I would say, if you could probably tell by the way, if they can, if here's what I would say, if they can validate by their tone or nonverbals that they don't understand, you know, the simple painting things or even what you're saying, that's probably a red flag. If they understand those things and they're confident in something that you can use Google Translate or whatever to get your point across, I think there's a lot of different variables that are tied into that. I don't think language in itself is an indicator at all. Our best painters they only speak Spanish, and I'm like, there's no way for me to know if they're going to be a good painter or not, just if I know if they speak Spanish or not. So but I do think as a business owner, now a lot of these subcontractors, they have their own business, right? So are they going to be a good business owner and steward this business partnership with us, or are they just going to be someone who they just want a job and do the work and not really care about, you know, the finer things of growing their own business? So I don't know. The language thing is a tough one, because when I taught myself Spanish, that was because, like, I just had a fear of failure. And if I didn't speak people's language, which a lot of our crews only spoke Spanish, you know, back 7-8 years ago, or let's just say that most people on the crews, most of the workers could only speak Spanish, there's no connection. And that was like a failure to me. If I couldn't connect and get my point across and understand them 100% or clear, I feel like we failed in this business relationship, this partnership, that I don't want that. And so whether it's using Google Translate, whether it's trying to speak another language, I would say go all in on that. Go all in on that. Put the effort in, and don't be afraid to look silly, to act it out. Pointing is an awesome language. Hand gestures is an awesome language. Eye contact is an awesome language. But I would say that if you care about the way they communicate, if you don't speak the same language, Maybe someone's language isn't like a verbal language. Maybe someone's language is, the painting language, or maybe someone just speaks money. Like if someone speaks money, I'm not going to talk to them about how to lead their people in a way where they're happy about their breakfast or their lunch, right? I'm going to talk to them about how you can make the most money, and that's speaking their language. So if you can speak people's language, I think you're going to set yourself up for success, because there are a lot of people in this industry who don't do that. And people get taken advantage of, they get misunderstood, they get cheated, they get scammed because of that barrier. And someone's got to break through that. And I would say if you put all the effort into breaking through that, you might not break through totally, but the people who are on the other side of that barrier are going to notice the care, and they're going to probably put their best foot forward because they see that you're putting your best foot forward. If that makes sense. I don't know, I was kind of talking there, but to get back to the language thing, I don't think language I wouldn't say alone that's an indicator of if they're going to be good or bad painters.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great. So you get a pool, you sync up, you have kind of this initial, gut check a little bit, If you're feeling like you're seeing what you would want to see to start to progress, how do you get into actually establishing the relationship? And this gets into, right, the expectations and too, like, where are you doing this? How long is this taking? What are you doing while you sync up? Like, walk us through the process.
Yeah. And are you saying like the relationship when you're like on projects together and you're that part of it?
To even enter into the relationship at all. Like, let's say you put out an ad, or you hit the pavement and you got a couple leads. You maybe did an initial vetting of those leads, but now you're meeting with folks to kind of screen, interview, establish the relationship. What does that process look like?
Gotcha. It's similar to if you're on a sales appointment and you want to establish a relationship or a connection with the person that you are trying to sell a product or a service to. You're going to ask them for their core needs in a roundabout way or in a straightforward way. You want to know their needs so that you can meet them with your product and or service. It's the same type of thing. When we have subcontractors come in for their first time, not only am I making assumptions based off of what I am hearing and seeing from them as far as a first impression, that means a lot, but also I want to know what their needs and wants are. Because if their wants and needs are not aligned with our culture and our, what we can provide and what we would want from a subcontractor, it's that orientation, that initial conversation is going nowhere, and I'm not going to waste their time, and I hope they wouldn't want to waste my time. So I would probably probe into. Normally, we ask subcontractors the basic questions: how long have you been painting? How many people work for you? What can you do? What are the skills that you have? What do you not like about working with some companies? Like, what kind of turns you off? What's annoying? What do companies that you have worked for in the past, what do they do really well, and what do you appreciate? I think those are the type of questions that are basic. We ask everyone, but I would say it's amazing what you would uncover when you ask about their needs and probe into those. For example, I had someone come in 2 years ago, and they wanted to just start working because there was something going on in their life that they just needed to work. And they didn't know their value as much as other people. So they said, hey, I'm willing to work, and here's what I'm going to commit to. And I trust you guys, and this is what I would need to make on an hourly basis if you were to break it up to per hour. And when I found out that they needed to just get to work and physically move, I was like, all right, that makes sense, and I can meet you where you're at, and I can tailor how we can approach this relationship differently than if someone came to me and they have 12 people that work for them and they just need to fill their schedule. Or it's a whole different way of approaching those conversations if you know someone's needs and wants. So, and that's something that we want to be extremely honest as well. So if a subcontractor comes in and they want A, B, and C, and we can only give them A, we need to say that and say, we can only give you this. So if these other two things, B and C, are important to you, I don't want to set ourselves up for disappointment because I can't promise that we can fulfill those. And I think you'll realize once you're honest and once you ask a lot of questions about needs and wants, not only as a business, but as people, as human beings, people are going to respond like positively to that. And that's how you can start that relationship. And from there, it's relationship management and fostering versus like, you don't want to go into like the 4th month of working with a subcontractor and not know anything about them. Right? It's a business. Sure. Yeah, it's painting. Yeah, painting is paint, right? It's, colors and substance, but there's more to that than just paint. And I think that's when people don't understand how deep you can get in the lives of other human beings that are subcontractors or employees, and you can miss the mark if you don't ask the right questions.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And it's interesting. I think it's an insightful way to look at it it is self-serving. Like you end up by seeking to understand what they want, what they need. You get access to the information that you ultimately need to make sure that your wants and needs as a business are going to be met, right? Because you're clear on what you need. And so you can ask them directly, hey, can you do this? Or is this what you want? But it just skews their answers. Whereas if you come at it a little bit more open, hey, what do you want, need? So how are you, what's the environment? Are you doing this like outside by their truck? Are you meeting for coffee to do this? Are you, where is this happening?
Most of these discussions or orientations are just conversations. They're usually I would say if you first meet someone, it's going to be anywhere. It can be on the street, at a coffee shop, at a paint store. But when you actually set up a time to meet for an orientation or, the just get to know you type of talk, it's usually in our office, in a meeting room, or it's at a coffee shop that's close to where that subcontractor is working at the time. Or it could be a phone call. I don't like phone calls at all because, like we said, the nonverbals, the tone, you can't really, it's hard to know really if, it's hard to validate if they hear what you're saying and if they understand and receive exactly what you're saying. And that clarity is a huge deal for us. So in our office is where we usually meet them, or a coffee shop, or even sometimes at a paint store. But we make sure that it's in an environment that we're not distracted, and that we can focus on them, they can focus on us, and make sure they ask the right questions and that we ask the right questions. 90 to 95% of our subcontractor orientations happen in a little conference room at our office. It lasts anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. So.
Okay. And then so you're asking conversations, what else, or you're asking questions, having that conversation. What else are you doing? Are you showing them anything? Are you using any tools during this time? Mm-hmm. What does that look like?
So we show them the only thing we show them is how we communicate. And I think that we've learned over the years, that is what turns on and turns off subcontractors and employees both. So if you can show them exactly how things are communicated, from getting the job, pictures, work order, how everything is super clear and easy, subcontractors, or we in general, want to hear clear and easy, right? With anything. We want things to be clear and we want things to be easy. So that's the outcome. That's the goal we want. And for us to achieve that outcome is to show them exactly what a project looks like. We can show them any project that we have going on. Here's what it looks like. Here's what a work order looks like. Here's what the conversation back and forth between the project manager and the subcontractor looks like. Here's what the price looks like, photos, all of that. And we believe that we can have the smoothest, the simplest way to communicate that there ever is. And from working back in the day when all we had was emails and printed out work orders, there were so many emails. I'm trying to remember, but so many emails would get confusing. They weren't organized. I'd be like, so what project is this for again? Because you can't quickly tie an email or a conversation with a project. But our system is it's so organized and straightforward that at any point you know exactly what project you're talking about. And I mean, it's the technology these days and the applications that are out there. It's pretty cool to see how smooth a process you can get. And your job as the project manager, our job as the contractor, is to explain with clarity how smooth and how great it is working with us logistically. We can talk about the price all day long. We can talk about, can you paint cabinets better than I think I can paint cabinets? But logistically and communication and how that works, the organizational stuff about that relationship, you want to make that very clear and very simple. And that's what subcontractors and business partners are going to want to look for.
And I think that's an important thing. Just even how you first went into this is your whole frame for this is a sale. I mean, your frame for this is, we have Paris Painting. We are trying to sell Paris Painting to this subcontractor. Is kind of how you're looking at it. Now, obviously, there's certain things that you're going to ask of them, but I think that's something that's so important. And even to people need to, and obviously, I think when you look at this, it's kind of like, oh yeah, no duh. But I don't think that people appreciate it, week to week. Is when you think about growing your business, yeah, you need to sell to customers and you need to sell to labor. Like you like a painting business that grows gets good at those two things. It gets good at selling to the public, to the consumer, and it gets good at selling to the labor force that is going to then serve, the consumers under that brand. And so thinking about it that way, obviously you need to be clear on what do I need to make sure of, but presenting it in that kind of way. Mm-hmm. How about getting into, I don't know, like how are you setting, you mentioned it, let's dive into that, like the price component, how much you pay, and then maybe insurance and just starting to navigate some of those more technical or I don't know, kind of the brass tacks of it. Mm-hmm. How do you approach that in the conversation?
Yeah. We approach it differently than probably a lot of other markets. A lot of other markets have rules and regulations for working with subcontractors and being a subcontractor or having a business. So, I mean, the technicalities of it maybe look a little different in our market versus other markets, but we do require subcontractors to have insurance, liability, workers' compensation, and auto insurance as well. And but as far as that goes, I think the pricing, there's pricing and there's those technical points that you talked about. We don't see a lot of differentiation between someone's insurance and someone else's insurance. Sure. As far as subcontractors. So that's like, hey, they need to check these boxes for us to work with them, basically. When it comes to price, I think a lot, the question that I get the most from other painting companies is, when you work with subcontractors, what percentage do you pay in labor? Is it 30%? Is it 50%? Is it 45%? That's like, man, if I had $1 for each time I was asked that question, I wouldn't be here talking with you. But I think that is one of the misconceptions I think that people have about working with subcontractors that haven't worked with them before and are timid about doing so is the labor percentage. And it does not have to be a percentage. We're firm believers in Paris Painting that it's about the individual project versus a percentage. So we talk to our subcontractors that way too. We have more than half of our subcontractors that we meet for the first time. They say, what percentage do you pay? And my answer every single time is we don't pay percentages. And they're like, why don't you pay percentages? That seems a little sketchy. But I give them this example where if you have a big house, all we're doing is painting the siding. There's very little windows, so you're not prepping off a lot. There's no scraping. It's like smooth LP siding. And you're spraying that sucker 2 coats, and the material percentage of that job is going to be closer to 20%. It's going to be higher percentage materials. So if you want to have the same contribution margin at the end, profit margin, your labor needs to be a lower percentage. So you might give out 25% labor on that job. And then, a painting subcontractor could be like, well, why are you only giving me 25%? Then I would say, well, here's the deal. If I had a job where it was all Victorian mansion, old style restoration, where we're not spraying we're not spraying an ounce of paint. We're brushing and rolling everything, and we might only use 5 gallons of paint. But this $30,000 painting project, I'm giving the labor 50% labor because my materials are only like 2 or 3%. So is it fair to me to then say, oh, I'm sorry, we agreed on 40%, so I'm going to run off with 10% more profits, and all that's going to go in my pockets, versus we tell the subcontractor it doesn't matter the percentage because you're going to lose a lot and you're going to win a lot. It matters per job. And the way you're going to make more money is by being more effective and efficient. Train your people to be better and to be faster. That way you can do more projects in a less amount of time. So I think that everyone should think in hours and in a budget per project than just a straight percentage. Because I can guarantee you this: if a painting company comes to me saying, "Oh, I pay 40% for every job to labor," I can guarantee you that painting company has misbid projects and has underbid projects. And do you think their subcontractors are going to want to take that 40% labor on a misbid project? No. So what are you going to do? You're going to pay more labor. What does that do to your whole labor for the whole conglomerate of projects? Your labor percentage is now going up to like 45% because you have some projects that you're losing money on because you misbid them. But if you're giving 40% on every single project, you don't have the opportunity to make up that margin back. So the people that say their labor is, oh, we pay 40%. No, you're actually paying probably 45, 46% because no one's perfect in the cell, right? So
Sure.
Being real with yourself to make sure that you take into consideration things per project, that's the key. And I know I dove a little deeper into that, but I would say if you can get to a unique per project budget or hours, that's going to be the way to go. You're going to win when the subcontractor wins, and you guys are going to lose when you misbid things. You're still going to give up that labor to be fair, but you're going to ask your subcontractor to be a little tighter on this one. So I don't know if that answers a question about the technicalities of it, but
no, I think that's great. And I would say this, like to your point, I think from a business standpoint, that's super important to per project. And I think that if you haven't done a good job maybe selling the sub up to that point, you maybe wouldn't have you wouldn't have the rapport with them. You wouldn't have the equity with them in a short period of time in order for them to trust you through that. But I think that, you can sell to here's how it's going to be easy. Here's how you can work with us. And you can build some of that trust, and then even on that too, I think it's a both end. You can kind of show them how you can lose on a percentage basis too, and so this can be good for both of us if we're really aligned. And here's how we're gonna do our end of the bargain to make sure we're aligned. So totally. I think it's good, man. I think that's a good place for us to pull up. There's so many more questions. I know we're just getting to, okay, whenever a sub starts and test projects and check-ins and those kinds of things. But I think I'm gonna have you back on.
Yeah,
we're gonna
totally
have to do a part 2 of this. But you've been generous with your time. It is the fall. We're getting through. Every day counts here in Minnesota for exterior season. So. Brother, appreciate the time. Good stuff. Sure. We'll do it again soon and pick up where we left off on the conversation.
For sure. Thanks, Hogan. Appreciate you, man.
All right, man. Talk soon.
All right. Later.
Bye.